Hello, hello. This is Alex Burkett, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. In this episode, my co-founder Ali Decker and I are talking to Michael Keenan, a freelance writer and the co-founder of Peak Freelance, which is a private membership community designed to help you grow your freelance writing business. We asked Michael tons of questions about how to build and manage a community, how to charge more as a freelance writer, and how to best work with clients as a freelancer, and vice versa. The idea of building a community is fascinating to me, both because of how powerful a community is and because of how difficult it is to truly pull off. I think every business wants a community and many think they've built one, but a true community is hard to find and even harder to build, manage, and maintain, especially as it scales in size. And I think in these times of increasing social alienation, remote work, and just a general digital existence, having a tribe is all the more important. Anyway, we cover these ideas and more in this episode, so without further ado, here's my conversation with Michael Keenan.
I think we will cover a lot of the freelance writing industry and based off of what you had put over. I also do have my my list of dishes to share with you from Guadalajara if you want.
Yeah, this is amazing. So I actually am curious because I haven't spent as much time in Mexico as I should have. My aunt lives in Pátzcuaro. So I still have yet to visit her, but I've done Mexico City, and I feel like the tacos there were probably the best I've had in my life.
So do have really good tacos.
But like I know there's like all these different regional varieties of different like kind of traditional cuisine. So what are the differences between Guadalajara and like Mexico City, or I don't know, what are like the specialties like where you are?
Yeah, so I mean, from what I understand, right? So I've been to Mexico City a few times, but Mexico City has a lot more outside influence, obviously. So you can find like expensive restaurants that do traditional Mexican food really well. And I think the difference here in Jalisco is like Jalisco, which is Jalisco State, which is where Guadalajara is a part of. It's the biggest city in Jalisco. And it's it's like quintessentially Mexican. It's home of mariachis and tequila and the dances, and the culinary specialties are things like birria, which is kind of like a lamb or goat stew. And you can put them into tacos. They also do chilaquiles, but chilaquiles you can find anywhere. And again, those chilaquiles aren't even just like regional differences. They come down to even just the restaurant itself. And the chilaquiles are tatopes, which are like fried corn triangles, like basically tortillas that you would cut up and then fry. And it's usually a house sauce that they make. And it could be a green sauce, red sauce, yellow, white sauce with cream. And then it's just like mixed in with the topes, and then everyone adds different stuff. So chilaquiles is kind of across the board. Everyone makes chilaquiles, and it's different region, state, restaurant, and they're delicious. The most popular thing here, like if you were to come to Guadalajara, you'd get is it's called tortas ahogadas. And the tortas ahogadas are it literally means like a drowned torta. Because they're pork sandwiches and they're on French rolls, and then they're drowned or doused or drowned in tomato sauce and a chili sauce. So if you were to come to Guadalajara, that's the thing that you would see first, because they're all over the place. Tortas ahogadas.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like a French chania, like the Portuguese dish. I don't know if you've heard of that one, but it's kind of drowned in tomato sauce and cheese, and like it's just this really rich dish. I'm guessing this is pretty rich. Like you're not probably going to have one of these every day.
No, I don't. I mean, maybe some people do, but I can't eat. I can't eat pork every day. So
yeah, I feel like there's always one food in like kind of a traditional like cultural context that is like that like you go in as a tourist and you eat every day for a week and you're like, oh man, you come back and gain 10 pounds. Mm-hmm. Like when I was in Colombia, my favorite thing was the bandeja paisa. But like nobody can eat that every day because it's like 4,000 calories in a meal. And the same thing, like where I'm from in Wisconsin, like, it's cheese curds, beer, brats. And like, if you just eat that every meal, you're not gonna feel great. So if you had to start on like one dish, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, because I'm going to Iowa for the Iowa State Fair in August, and I'm excited to try fried cheese.
Are you from
because
Iowa?
apparently that's the thing. No, fried butter. No, I'm not. But my cousin lives there.
I have a ton of family
my cousin
in
lives
Iowa.
there. Okay,
Midwest
what part?
is a
In Des
strange
Moines?
place.
Some in Iowa City and some in Des Moines. My dad grew up there for a bit. He went to the University of Iowa before he moved to Chicago, where I am now. So I have some weird roots over there. But every time I hear Iowa, I'm like, hello, I know some things about Iowa.
Yeah, I've heard there's a lot of cool stuff there, and I heard the city has been up and coming for a few years. I don't know what coronavirus did to it, but it has like an up and coming art scene and like a younger scene, so it should be pretty cool to kind of check out too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big push to get more startups there as well, I think, especially in Des Moines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, outside of that, actually, one last question. So the dishes that you mentioned, some of them sound difficult maybe to make. What's like a beginner recipe that I should shoot for this weekend?
Oh, try and make some chilaquiles. It's
Chilaquiles.
Again, because you can like kind of add a little bit. You'll find a lot of different recipes online, but you can. But yeah, I would try and make your own chilaquiles and see how that comes out, because it gives you. It's not something like you have to follow. It's really strict. You can kind of get a little creative. You can throw avocado, black pepper, crema, which like Mexican cream, which is a little more like sweet and a little more like thick, and like you can put whatever you want on top of your chilaquiles. So I would definitely go for something like that. And definitely stick to cojita, which is, I think it's called cojita. I forget it's the name of the cheese that you want to put on top of it. It's like, cojita, and it's a little salty.
My fiance is half Mexican and he uses that when he does his elote. It's so good.
Okay, yeah. So it's the cojita that you want to throw on top of the chilaquiles. And that's the stuff. I would definitely try that.
That sounds cool. It sounds like a group activity, like a good kind of date activity or like a friend thing. Like I do this with tacos all the time. Like I learned to make kind of the Mexican street tacos. Yeah. And the base ingredients are all pretty simple, but then there's a lot of like customization that you can do. So it's really fun for groups to do this, which leads me into the next point. I wanted to ask you about how you got into building and managing a community. From your freelance roots. So this was a great transition, completely planned. So you run Peak Freelance, correct? Can you give us a little background on that, what it is, how you got there?
Yeah, for sure. So as the story goes, I didn't start Peak Freelance. It was actually Elise Dobson who started Peak Freelance, and it began as a Patreon group for her to post her own written content for people. And she had moved over into Podia, and she wanted to do a couple more things like the expert interviews and kind of create a bigger community just outside of Patreon. And early on, I did an SEO masterclass. I think I was like one of the second or third people to talk in the group. And after that, we started talking right away. I was going to sell her a product that I was making for the group. And she stopped and she said, better yet, why don't you join me as co-founder in Peak Freelance? I think at that month, it was only like a month old in the Podia group because it switched over into the Podia. And that's how we just like separate the two. It used to be Patreon, now it's Podia, but now it's like the full. And so she asked me to come on as co-founder and like a managing partner. So that's how I actually got into Peak Freelance. And the reason why I immediately said yes, I didn't really have to think much at all about it, was because it is a community that I wish I had when I first started freelancing, because I've been freelance writing in particular for 5 years now, and it was tough to get in to freelance writing. And it was tougher to figure out like what my niche was and and learn how to like scale a writing business. So I feel like if I had a group like Peak Freelance, it would have been a lot easier. And I think the trial and the testing was good, but I feel like now it's time for me to share that information with other people. And Elise was in the same spot, and we both have the same astrology signs. We're both Aquarians. So we were like, all right, we're sold, like, let's do this together. And and we have very like synchronous thinking. Like we are very on point with the same things that we want to do. And we've been able to like scale things like content production. We've been able to do like more expert interviews and create more products faster for people. So we wanted to kind of bring together what we know and what we want to do for the freelance writing industry in general. And that's how I got started co-founding Peak Freelance.
That's cool. So I have a question about the community, but first I want to know, You mentioned you mesh very well with Elise. You have the same astrological sign. I'm not sure if you have the same Enneagram.
Yes.
We've tested that here at Omniscient. I think, Ali, we have, what's your type?
I'm a 6.
All right. So I'm a 3 and a 7, I think, tied. But we've done all this stuff. But the cool part about our partnership is we all kind of have different specialties and different like inclinations, but our principles and goals all align. But we all operate in pretty different ways. So I was wondering if like how you delineate like the work between you and Elise. Like, who do you have specialties? Do you have swim lanes, or is it just kind of like, you know, scrappy startup mode where you're both kind of doing everything that needs to be done? Or like, how do you think about that partnership?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's actually, that has changed twice already. So we were in startup mode, scrappy startup mode for a while. So we're doing everything from marketing. We were doing everything from marketing ourselves to creating the products, creating the free content, creating the members content, running ads. So like we were definitely in scrappy startup mode. And then 2 months ago, we hired an apprentice, like a paid apprenticeship through a UK agency. And so we thought that we were going to be able to kind of like, all right, like we were starting to pick like create an internal structure, right? And we were going to be able to start like handing off the tasks to this person so they can kind of do like the scrappy stuff for a little bit, and then we'd build them up with us. Unfortunately, the apprenticeship didn't really work. So we're back. So we're kind of back in scrappy startup mode. However, what we're doing to, again, like you had said, kind of like create those swimming lanes is now we are in talks with some contractors to help with things like video production, contractors to help run with ads, and contractors. And we still do, I mean, we'll always do the products and the members content. But even right now, like we are writing the free content on the blog for, you know, lead generation purposes and creating those lead magnets. So right now, like basically how we are running Peak Freelance is we meet every week and we kind of brainstorm things that need to get done, like in priority. We kind of plan out what the products for members are going to be down like in July, August, September. So we have that plan. And then we're thinking, all right, like on these tasks, like what contractors do we need to work with to get these things done by X date? And that's kind of how we're managing things right now. And also I get, again, that apprenticeship, the thing just did not work. And that just ended like last week. So we're kind of like, we're coming back around to like figuring out how to create like an internal structure, I guess, so we can kind of lean into our specialties instead of doing things like video editing and, you know, transcript editing and so forth.
So would you say that's kind of where the conversation started, is you and Elise saying, you know, what do we like to do? What are we better at? And then anything that didn't fall in those lanes, you found someone to specialize in those?
Yeah, for sure. And an example of that is the Facebook ads, because we've been trying it on our own. Okay. And we've been getting some decent results, like and she's more running the Facebook ads thing. And we had decided like, all right, like let's try and find like an outside agency. Cause again, it takes away the time for us to like plan and grow Peak Freelance. Cause we do have short-term and long-term goals that need to be met, that we need to like remove ourselves from the process of doing the nitty-gritty work. So again, like now we're just becoming like managers of contractors within the business. And in terms of, again, like splitting the work, the thing is like we do both have the same specialty. So Elise is definitely better. I can definitely give her the hands-on for being more organized. So she's got the Asana board set up. She's the one that keeps the organization. If it wasn't for her, like I would be a mess. So that's like her strength. And then together we work on the products, right? So for example, the Content Refresh Handbook, which is one of our most popular products, we basically said like, you know, we created the outline, the plan, and then it was like, all right, like what are we splitting up? What videos need to be done? And we kind of just run it like that.
What are some of the other products that you sell?
Yeah, so right now we have a Content Refresh Handbook, which is for updating old content. We also have an advanced writing course, and that's for, we have an advanced writing course. We also have a beginner's course, and that's because we are pivoting Peak Freelance to be more for intermediate and advanced freelance writers, and making that more of a community for them. So we want we built the beginner's course for people who like just are not there yet. Like they still need to know how to build a website. They still need to know, the basic like lead generation things that you can do to get freelance writing clients. So that course is for them. We also have master classes with Kaylee Moore. We have freelance. We have email templates for freelancers, and we have like over 20 templates for everything that you could think of, from like asking for more work to saying goodbye to clients, getting testimonials, cold pitching, warm pitching. So those tools are all focused around stuff that we pull from members that they're having problems with, or things that we've struggled with in the past that we're like, all right, this tool would be, or this product would be amazing for other people to use, because they don't have to do any of the research.
So that was actually going to be another question, is how you come up with these product ideas. It sounds like, you guys are freelancers and you've come from that background. So I'm sure there's some scratch my own itch, what kind of things you would like as a freelancer, but it sounds like you also can source some of these insights from your audience, from your community, which I feel like is a huge benefit of building a community, right? It's sort of a self-reinforcing feedback loop. Yeah,
definitely. And we have an ongoing list of potential products based off of conversations that happen inside of the group. And Elise and I are always messaging, like chatting with people either publicly or privately, and figuring out what their concerns are. That's what the whole group is basically built around, right? Like people need help with value propositions and USPs. So we have a masterclass from Kaylee Moore, who's she's one of the best freelance writers out there, And so those products are all based off of common freelancer problems.
How did you choose, it sounds like you're in the middle of this, but how did you choose to shift towards intermediate and advanced freelancers versus more beginner ones? What went into that thought process?
So interesting enough, we were chatting with a Facebook ads expert, and she's also a community building. She's both. She's an ads expert, and she's an educator in Latin America, and she has communities. And we had a consultation call with her, and she kind of sprung that onto us. She was like, well, who's the group for? And we're like, well, it's for freelance writers. And she's like, yeah, but for what kind of freelance writers? Yeah. And we're like, well, it could be anyone. And she's like, and she explained, like, when you have expert and more expert or more advanced people, it can create kind of like a butt heads, like if you have too much of a mix. So she had recommended creating some type of like hierarchy, and not like for people to compete with each other, but just like have that split. So from there, we were like, yeah, of course, and our goal, right? Like our proposition is to get people from 250 an article to 1,000 an article. And I don't know if like the people who are just getting into freelance writing, they still have to put in like the foundational work, right? And we kind of, the people that live inside of Peak Freelance and the members just are not there anymore. They've been doing 3 to 5 years. So we kind of want to have it stay in that same mindset, if you want to call it.
Do you find that those that are more experienced, they have a better understanding of what they need and what they would need from you all? Like, do you find they're more engaged?
Yeah, definitely. And what I love about the intermediate and kind of, and I don't like to always use this term, but since we're on it, like when finding these like advanced versus intermediate or expert, is you find that they actually love to share the information with each other. Because a lot of the people who have like broken out of that, that like income level or whatever you want to call it, they know where like they were a couple of years ago. So you see a lot of interaction between those types of groups, and even people who have been freelancing for 8-9 years, like there's always something to learn from each other. And the way we position is like, you're not just a freelance writer, right? You're a business owner. So I think no matter what stage you are, beginner, you've been doing it for a year, you've been doing it for 10 years, you're always learning something new about building a business. And you see a lot of that in the group with everyone. And I learned some stuff too, like for my own writing business. Again, like I'm not very good at organization. Like it's not my strength. And people like, have taught me things from the group also about like, building out like certain templates, like onboarding templates. And it's a really beautiful interaction that you find between everyone in the group.
So how does Peak Freelance affect your writing business and vice versa?
Yeah. And That's a good question, because that's something that I have gotten often. So when people ask about like how I get clients, the truth is that like since we started Peak Freelance, I have not gotten new clients. I have three, but in one of those clients, there's three different umbrellas. So it's like I have like I work with like five other managers in those three clients, and I have not looked for new work. I'm not dropping any of my clients because right now that schedule is good and it's consistent. And I use that writing money to fund the stuff in Peak Freelance, like those extracurricular activities, like the extra things that we want to do. And we do that because, right, like we're in that bootstrapping stage. So I use those clients. Well, not use, that sounds terrible. But I keep my writing business going because one, it keeps me in the know of like what actually goes on in the freelance writing world. And then also like to fund, like help fund Peak Freelance so we can grow it. But yeah, I don't take on new clients. I'm very comfortable with where I am with my clients right now, and they're happy with the work and I'm happy with them. So we're all happy. So
that's good. I had another question. I'll think of it. Alex,
what's the vision? What's the overall vision with Peak Freelance? Like, where do you want to bring it? Like what, you're investing in it. Where do you want to take this thing?
Yeah. So right now, so our focus, I want to become, for Peak Freelance right now, the short-term goal is to become the place for all things freelance writing. So we have the group. We're also building out like the educational branch with the blog and like the beginners courses and tools and whatnot. But my goal is to be the place our goal is to be where you can build a freelance business, grow your freelance business, start a freelance business, hire freelance writers. Because we do have, our members are also a part of a writers directory, which you can find through Google search. So like our goal is to be the place for freelance writing, education, hiring, business building. And then the long-term goal, and this is like my most exciting goal for Peak Freelance as a brand, is, are you familiar with Creative Mornings?
Yep.
I'm not. What is Creative Mornings?
I've been in Creative Mornings before.
Okay, so Alex, what Creative Mornings it happens around the world. And I think it's Friday or Saturday, Allie, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it depends on the city.
Yeah. And around the world, one day, like once a month, creatives meet up and it's like usually for breakfast, like they have coffee or rolls it's always been breakfast for me. And then there's a speaker, and then all the like creatives from the area can come in and like meet each other and network and, drink free coffee, meet other people. We met one of our really good friends at Creative Mornings here in Guadalajara. So, and I really love that atmosphere because I love chatting with people. I love getting to know people. So my big goal for Peak Freelance is to have that kind of setup for freelancers in general. So again, like freelance designers, photographers, because I do like hobby photography, developers, programmers, right? And have these like freelancer meetups in local cities, in the cities where people can get together. Very similar to Creative Mornings. That's like the big goal. That's my big aim. What I think about when we're like planning stuff, I'm like, all right, that's the big goal for Peak Freelance. Because freelancers need support,
Yeah.
Like we need support, and there's not a lot of support out there for freelancers across the board.
What is it about the in-person thing that drives that interest? Because I think I'm actually really bullish on this, and I've been thinking a lot about the idea of connection, because I feel like everything is digitized and virtual, especially in this pandemic, obviously. But I'm bullish on kind of in-person, like real life kind of connection-based things. But I'm curious what drives that interest for you in terms of your vision.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of my earlier years, like when I was 19, I moved out of my parents' house and I traveled a lot. And that's where that desire comes from, is when I travel, I just love learning people's stories and I love meeting people. And I love it digitally too. Like I'm very happy to be hanging out with you two and chatting about this, but I do kind of miss like the in-person experience.
It's not the same.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And it's finding that balance. That's, that's the benefit of it. And yeah, so it's like the background of travel that I have, and mostly in the US, but also like globally I've traveled, but a lot of it like backpacking and taking trains and buses in the US and meeting all these amazing people that drives me to like want to be a part of something that has that big like in-person community feel.
You sound like Alex.
I was going to say, I relate to this heavily. I mean, I used to go to like hostel pub crawls, and like Outsite was this cool thing that it's like a co-working, co-living space. And I used to do a lot of solo travel, you know, with friends as well. But like, it was really cool to go to places and meet different people in similar and in vastly different situations than me. That was something I really enjoyed. And I think there's something interesting here because you come from a freelance background, which is by nature like a pretty solo endeavor. And I feel like I've always gravitated towards like entrepreneurial freelance. You know, I've worked at companies, but they've often been remote or like highly autonomous. So I haven't had, you know, I didn't jump out of college and go to Oracle and have, you know, a training class of like a couple hundred people my age. So I felt like there was always this drive towards things that were community-based and connection-based. Conferences, meetups, all that stuff. So I wonder if your background in freelance also kind of, you know, converged in this desire towards, you know, wanting to connect with more people in your boat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm going to just kind of connect it back to the traveling too, is the reason I went freelance was for like the freedom and, you know, being solo, but I'm personally like a cat, right? So I'm very objective normally. And even when I travel, I can spend a lot of time alone. I can spend days, weeks by myself, like doing my own thing. And then when I'm ready, I just am like pounce, and I'm ready to talk to people, and I'm ready to like meet people, and I'm ready to like be subjective and like get into everything. And then when I'm ready, I can kind of like, I can step back, you know? And it's the same thing with freelancing. I don't have to join all the calls all the time. You know, I can kind of like take a step back and be like, I'm taking a Slack break this week. So like just minimize communication. And then the week after that, I can jump into Slack groups with like clients and peak freelance, I'm always available, but like with client work, I can get in there again and I can start like chatting with people like I normally do. So that's kind of, I think that's how I feel. And that's why I want it to be once a month, because I can't do, every day.
Yeah, I remember, I mean, you edited my interview with Elise, but that was one of the main drivers for me to go into a full-time role, because I was freelance right out of college, and it was a pretty lonely, like I didn't have the happy hours after work that all my friends did. But when I joined like HubSpot, I was still remote. So I went to Boston once a quarter, and that was enough for me. And there were like meetings every like couple days, but I had a community that I knew was always there. But for the most part, I was like, I still want that freelance element of like, I want to choose how much I get involved outside of like, you know, what I'm supposed to do. But I feel like we're pretty similar in that, where it's like, and now I'm glad to see things like Peak Freelance popping up. I wish I had that, because it would have been enough to satisfy my need for like a community, people that got me, people that were just kind of, it was like a pre-built, it was almost like coworkers, but not really. And then it's there if you need it, but it's not a requirement. And it seems like something like Creative Mornings would be a perfect fit for that.
Yeah. And I love that point that you made about people understanding each other, and to bring it kind of like back to what we were saying with the, like kind of separating, having the beginner side. And then this side was like, like these people better understand where they are. And just like people who are just starting better understand like their same mindsets and the struggles that they're going through. Each side has different struggles and challenges that they're going through.
So where's the cutoff? Is it like years that you'd establish it?
Yeah, so that's actually something that we're kind of learning as we go. We don't actually have like the cutoff yet, but we do, the way that we're kind of doing it right now is our messaging pushes people who don't have websites or don't have clients towards more of our like free learning materials. Gotcha. And then once they're ready, then they can like enter they're free to enter whenever, but that's what we do. Like we're kind of, our messaging pushes people over to the free learning stuff. Yeah.
It's also like because the content and products you put out probably imply that to a certain degree, right? Like if you're reading Neil Patel blog post and it's like, what is SEO? That's going to attract a certain audience. And then if you read like a CXL blog post and it's like, you know, here's how to correct the multiple comparison problems in segmentation. And you're like, okay, that's probably a little advanced, you know, and like just writing that content and selling those types of products is naturally going to include and exclude different people based on like how they perceive themselves. So I'm sure that factors into your selection on how you're building products as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And that's why most of our products are for members only. So people can purchase the products. Like if you wanted to buy the Content Refresh Handbook, you could, but all of the products are available free to members. And for that reason, because it's more tailored towards that type of audience.
How does Peak Freelance work if they do it all with businesses and agencies or anything like that? Like, do you build any bridges on behalf of your members, or do you kind of let them source their roles and then you empower them when they're in the middle of it all?
Yeah. So it's almost like a 50-50 split, I would say, because we have a lot of people who have even landed in-house roles, like because of Peak Freelance, and a lot of them. Awesome. So we're finding also a lot of people are doing in-house and then freelance on the side, which is totally cool. But we've gotten messages saying, thank you for the confidence, because we do a lot of it is like just a lot of the messaging is telling people, of course you can do it. Like that's what we're here for. We're here to support you. We're here to help you. And we've gotten a lot of the confidence, like, thank you for the confidence. Thank you for these tools, X, Y, and Z. And then the other side of that is we do have things such as sponsored job posts that only go to members and our lists. We have a jobs channel inside of the Slack group where members can refer other members and post the jobs that they're finding online. So I would say it's 50-50. It's like support and activation for helping people find jobs.
Does Peak, do they interview or vet writer or members before they join? Or is it like just open to people?
Yeah, that's another good question, because we've gotten that with the sourcing when we do, because if a company wants us to find writers, we do have a separate like service for that also. And we do have an entry survey so we kind of get a better idea of who this person is and like what their fit is within the group and within like the products that we can recommend them to. But that would be like the most, that's what I'm looking for. That would be the most like vetting that we do.
Gotcha.
I think we're still early on where we're not hitting a problem yet with like people kind of get it so far that this group is for this and the learning materials are for this. So yeah, we don't want to, I don't know if it's our place to like turn people away if they want to be involved,
I was just curious, like Alex and I have talked so much about community building. I know it's kind of a hot topic right now and people are coming at it from different angles, and I've seen all the above. Have you talked at all about plans to like cap the community down the line, or do you plan on just building it perpetually?
Yeah. So, and again, I love these questions because this is actually stuff that Elise and I talk about too. Elise and I just had this conversation because I think it may have been Ryan Law who was just talking about
I saw that one.
The inverse correlation between quality and community size. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but there are other models of communities and types of educational memberships, you can call them. The Andrew and Pete, the Atomic course, like they do a very good job. They have a whole business built behind like educational memberships and communities, and it's open. But what I've seen that they do, from what I remember, and this is something that we're going to do, is capping. For example, like we do things like monthly strategy calls. We do monthly town halls, and we have like stuff in the group that will have a limit cap, right? So we'll say, hey, like 30, like only 30 seats are available if the membership gets to that point. But for right now, we don't have plans to cap. We just have plans to manage the scale, if it does scale, to still be able to provide that same value to the people who like that personalization and that warm feeling that people get inside of the group. So our goal would just be to like help with that scale and creating just like maybe like little micro units inside of the community. So people still feel intimate, because we also, again, we do one-on-one calls. We book one-on-one calls with people every month. So the members themselves like chat with each other and get to know each other, which is something that people really love doing. I think like using those types of, I don't know if they're tactics, but they're like interaction.
More of engagement.
I don't have the word for it, but they allow community members to interact with each other in a personal level.
Yeah.
How does somebody choose to join a community like Peak Freelance, or like what are the reasons that somebody is drawn towards you? And then conversely, why does somebody leave a community like that?
So I'll start with leaving because we've had a couple of people leave for sure. Sometimes it's because, and this is something we had to do with tweaking our messaging. Sometimes it's because there's a lot of like crossover between the word writing and copywriting. So some people get in and they realize that we're not like ad copywriting. And a lot of the stuff we teach isn't really around, writing short form copy. A lot of the people are long form writers from health, B2B SaaS. People also leave because they don't want to be freelance writers anymore. And we've had a member who left and then came back. They left for a month because they wanted to go do something else. And then they came back and they're like, hey, I really miss freelance writing. Oh. And I love this group. So I'm back into freelance writing. So we're like, come on in, open arms. Like we're here. And the reason, so what's interesting is the reason people would join, we thought in the beginning was we're going to help you make more money, because the assumption is that everyone always wants to make more money. However, what we're seeing again through like interactions in the group and chatting with people is sure, like they want to make more money, but a lot of the people who are already making money that are still in the group need things like resources, support, right? Like just people, like again, Ali, like you had said, people who understand them. So
coworkers,
in a sense. So exactly. Yeah. So originally we thought it might've just been like a financial thing, but now we're finding that it's more support and right on-demand tools and resources. You can just go to the product section in your membership portal and you can find templates, you can find handbooks and checklists and things that you need to get your work done.
Yeah. Do you feel like over the last year, it's been more than a year now, with COVID, did it grow with people having less of a personal opportunity to connect and they wanted to kind of lean into like the digital connections?
It's possible. I can't say for sure if COVID was something that like
specifically drove it.
Yeah, specifically drew it. I feel my feeling from being a freelance writer for a while is that it was just needed whether COVID was around or not. Like, freelance writers needed some support whether COVID happened or not. Because most freelance writers are remote, right? Even the ones that are in-house today, like the HubSpots, even agency side, like Animals, like they're all remote. So people need that type of support regardless.
I do wonder on a macro level what's going to happen with the fallout from COVID, because I've heard trends and news stories about, like companies that are requiring you to go back to the office. People are actually just quitting their jobs instead of going back. And like, I think there's a lot of interesting things going on we talked about this trend already with communities, and I feel like people are really seeking tribes. And I wonder, there's also communities or platforms like Marketer Hire and places where you can more easily get ramped up in a freelance career. I do wonder if there's going to be a big drive towards more modular freelance-based careers and therefore communities like P Freelance as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't have too much. I'm not sure what the words are from like what to say in response, because I do believe that like we are going to push towards this type of community-based freelance support. But I feel like the competitive edge, especially in the sense of freelance writers, is like the cliche, right? Like it's built for freelance writers by freelance writers. And that's not a tagline we'd use, but sure, you can go join like the Marketing Hires freelance writers group, or you can, join a community where we are freelance writers and have been freelance writers. We're not just a marketing company, like trying to be freelance writers, So there's a difference. And there's definitely a gap for people who run groups that aren't actually they don't actually practice the subject of the group, the whole topic of the group. So there will be competition, of course. But I think my hope is that idea will like settle with people and they would like, that'll give us that competitive edge.
Yeah.
It certainly seems like there's enough room in the space. You mentioned that people leave the community because they leave freelancing. I wanted to ask on that. What are the reasons people quit freelancing?
Many reasons. Sometimes, for example, one of the members that just left and came back, they wanted to go into like PR communications. It was a new route that they were trying, and so you could leave, you could try it. You just go to different route, try something new. Other people leave. Again, another person had left actually because they were getting more into like Facebook ads and design. So obviously not a good fit for the group or freelance writing in general. So I think most people probably quit freelancing for, they have a change of course or they go in-house. There's nothing wrong with going in-house, and there are a lot of really amazing in-house company, in-house roles that, they're very valuable to anyone in content. And I think, one of the things that I've always said about freelance writing in general is that there's something that you do miss when you're a freelance writer just operating your own business. You miss kind of how content works, or like from an organizational standpoint. If you're not super involved with the company's editorial program, you miss things like how to run a program and how to track metrics. So there are reasons, like if someone wants to not just write articles, they want to get more involved, and maybe they're not comfortable, pitching strategy to some clients. They would pick up an in-house job doing strategy, take the lessons that they learn, and then come back to it maybe a few years later.
That's pretty much my story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very much like a cog in the machine, which was great because at the time I loved like writing. Well, I've never not loved writing, but I was very bullish on like the actual like production side. But when I went in-house, I didn't even know what SEO was. And I guess like five years ago, I mean, the work I did was a lot more editorial. But with a marketing background, I realized I could play a bigger role, and it did at HubSpot. But I did learn more of like the end-to-end content marketing versus like just the production side. But I love that writing part. So we'll see how it plays a role down the line. But I can see that story playing out too. But you said you have members that are 10 plus years as freelance writers. How many of those?
I would say there are very few are that long, but I would say a lot of current members have been like more 4 or 5 plus years. And we do have some of like the long-term vets in there too.
Do they ever talk about like, this is like third party conversation, but do they ever talk about like how much freelance writing has changed over the past decade? That's something I'd be so curious to hear.
No, actually, I haven't come across that.
Yeah.
But I would definitely be interested in hearing about how things have changed like that. So
those people
I'm going to write that down, actually.
How do people with like 10-year longevity in freelance, how do they continue developing their careers? What does that look like? What are the dimensions by which they kind of judge themselves and try to improve?
Well, I would say one of the biggest changes, maybe not from like client standpoint, is how we write for the internet now versus how we wrote for the internet 10 years ago. So I would say anyone who is in freelance writing, I mean, I would even say as of like 6-7 years ago, it's changed, right? So one, we've kind of I hate like making these big claims, but the Google algorithm is tending to favor articles that, that follow how people, like the science of how people read, right? So using common words, making everything easy to scan and easy, like very well formatted, breaking text up with images, using bullet lists, sourcing original research. So I think versus 10 years ago, the way just we wrote for the internet was a lot different. You could spam out an 800-word blog post with whatever keywords you want. You don't have to worry about the structure, really. So I think if you want to continue to grow, and what I do is like the science of reading, right? I read about content design. I read about like user experience, because user experience really does play into how to write an article, because a reader is interacting with your page, and you have to find ways to keep them on the page, and you have to find ways to keep them interested and give them the information that they want quickly and easily. So I think people who have been doing it for, the 10 plus years, that's going to be that transition for them to build on their career, because they already know how to write. There's not much you can probably teach them on how to write. It's more formatting and kind of like getting up to speed with the UX of writing. And not to be confused with UX writing, which is different. That's like writing for apps.
That always
the user
confused me
experience
too.
of long form writing. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we talked a lot about this in my prior role, because we were restructuring, how we publish content, everything from tables of contents to like headers. And I know a lot of that stuff plays a heavy role in SEO and the ability to rank, but also like the readability side of things as well. Sometimes those things go hand in hand and sometimes they're quite literally opposites. But right. I mean, I was on the Pillar team at HubSpot. So my work was regularly 5,000-10,000 words. And on a Google Doc, you just write. But then you get it published and it's like, is someone really going to scroll? And they added read time, which I know, like Alex, you did that to your blog, someone knowing like how long they have to read this post, tables of contents, all that stuff is just super important.
Well, I think on a macro level, what you're saying, I always look at kind of content through the lens of economics, and like there's sort of a supply curve and a demand curve. And it's like, you probably want to be in the place where the demand is very high and very few other people can actually do the thing that people want. So like the more you get into readability, user experience, all of that stuff, like you sort of chop off like a lot of the supply because not a lot of people are willing to go to that level. Whereas like the supply for people who can and will write an 800 word article, that's essentially, you could basically do in conversion.ai or copy.ai. It's similar. Like that's there's so many people there that you're not going to you can't command like high rates for that. And it seems like there's other dimensions by which you could produce scarcity, namely, specializing in individual niches, being like somebody with a strong voice or somebody with a strong brand, because there's only so many like Kaylee Moores and there's only so many, Ali Deckers, right? Like you sometimes want that person, right? So you can build a brand that way. I don't know. Is this resonating? Like, do you find that this is one of the primary dimensions by which somebody can raise their rates and be a more successful freelancer?
Yeah, no, and I love how you use supply and demand, because I trade equities and cryptocurrencies, so I'm always thinking about supply and demand. So for me, I was like, oh my God, yeah, that makes so much sense. I've never thought of it like in a supply and demand way. But yeah, no, I mean, so the other side, like creating content in that way, and like you had said, chopping off like the supply. The flip side is, you get better results for your clients, right? If you're formatting your articles for ways, you're getting higher, you're improving their search rankings. You're able to tack a number onto it, how many leads, how many conversions they get, right? Because if a reader comes on to your page and they have a good experience, I'm not going to say like they're totally in love with your brand. I don't know if anyone's in love with a brand, but if they have a really good reading experience, they're more likely to convert on that page. So yeah, like again, it's not just like a supply and demand thing. It's also, it helps you and it helps your clients get those results. And then you could show those results to, future clients. And it's like an endless cycle. And that's something that we push inside the group a lot. Like in our advanced writing course that we have, a lot of it is around structure, structure and format, same difference. But a lot of it is around like formatting articles and making them a better reader experience.
Do you help writers, or do you train people on how to report these things or how to communicate these things? Because I do feel like you're right on the incentive structures. Like companies are incentivized now to produce higher quality content, not just generic fluff. They're going to get better results, but not everybody knows that. And, not everybody can produce the analytics to get that feedback loop. So I don't know. I always felt like there's kind of a gap there between like sometimes freelance writers, can't communicate that, but they are doing the good work. I don't know. What do you think about that gap there?
Yeah, no, that's definitely a problem. And for example, I mean, I'm sure Ali can account for this. Big accounts like HubSpot, Help Scout, Shopify, they're not going to let a freelance writer into their Google Analytics and, like
they don't even let them in their CMS.
They don't even let them in the CRMs.
Rarely.
So, I mean, however, the first step is asking your content manager, right? Like asking Ali Decker, like, hey, do you guys track leads and are you open to sharing that information with me? And if they say no, what we use as a backup, and which is something that I always recommend, is because it's also public data, is plugging that URL into Ahrefs and then getting the traffic value. And the traffic value is simply just like how much money that company would have had to put into ads each month to get the amount of traffic that you got to the page.
So you educate your writers about this?
Yeah.
So they kind of feel like self-equipped. That's good.
But I do say, like, for example, because that's something that I've used because I can't get into all clients' backends. None of them really. So if they aren't willing to give things like leads or customers and let me share it publicly, I'll say like, hey, can I use the traffic value of this URL to promote it for my own work? And the responses I've got is yes, because it's like semi-public data. You have to pay for Ahrefs, but it's public data. You know?
what, why would you think companies wouldn't be willing to share, maybe not lead data, but like traffic data? Like, what have your writers said is the pushback on that?
That's a good question. And I don't really have an answer. I would just say, I know, maybe funded startups don't want, like, they want to protect their metrics.
Right.
And then I think, enterprise companies that are publicly traded just can't legally, they just legally are not allowed to share that. So that's just some of the challenges that you have to overcome as a freelance writer. Right. And again, I think a lot of content managers are willing to share some stuff, but the workaround is like, you can attach a number to your blog article by using that traffic value metric. And again, is it the end all of end all? No, but it's a way to say, like, this article was worth $20 a month, and then I refresh it, and now it's worth $50,000 a month. And it's a way to just make the mental connection between money and an article.
Right. Yeah. That was something that when I was reflecting back on like my pre-HubSpot days, that I wish I had known more about, is like my value as a writer. Obviously, like, the value you bring to your clients in terms of like content production and, literally checking boxes off. But in terms of like my individual value of like the writing I do and all that stuff, I didn't know a lot about that. And I didn't even know to reach out, even thinking back, like when I wrote for Founder, like I could have reached out and asked for even some like really preliminary metrics. At HubSpot, obviously, I was able to track some of my stuff, but it's also good for like confidence building and like understanding where to improve. And, because you can ask your clients for feedback, but usually it's in the style of like literal like red lines and, the high level feedback of like, how can I bring more value to your team? Sometimes that requires a metrics conversation. So it's really cool to see that that's what Peak's doing, because I think a lot of folks are so focused on the editorial. A lot of people get into writing for that reason, because they love writing. But when you look at it in terms of like a marketing function, we just had a big conversation internally about data-driven content marketing. And I think like boiling it down all the way to like the writer level, even the contractor level, as an editor and a content manager, I would love to be better at empowering our writers on how to do that themselves. So it's cool to see a community doing that as well. For sure. And again, like you said, freelance writers, even though we're solo and some of us are like the cats, but we still want to know where we fit into the bigger picture. Now, like, I want to know, like, am I actually making a difference here? And that was something I really struggled with, 2-3 years in, because I felt like I was improving on my writing. Like, I wasn't like getting the $20 articles like I did in the beginning, and I was starting to charge more and I was starting to get more confident, but I was like, am I even making a freaking difference here? Right. And that's kind of, and I think it's, it's a flip. It benefits the company also, because you have more confident writers. More confident writers are going to write better. They'll feel more comfortable saying like, hey, like, Ali, I see on the blog that we're missing like some of these keywords. I have a couple of recommended articles, right? It's like this endless flow. Like, they feel more comfortable helping you out, and then you give the articles back to that. It just, it makes the relationship better. As a contractor, even as an agency, we just talked about learning how to speak your client's language, leads, traffic value, all of that stuff. You might not be able to get to the heart of it because it's a lot of internal stuff, but being able to speak in those terms versus like, I write good, that's really valuable too. But a lot of people can do that. So it's all about understanding, like, getting to the heart of why someone would hire you, why someone would keep you on in the long run, and how you can ultimately help them look good to their boss or help them hit their like bottom line metrics too. Because content's super, super valuable. But sometimes it's more than just how high it ranks, right? There's a lot more that goes into it. I think it's always more than just how high it ranks, right? Because like you said, you can have like a crappy blog post and it ranks really well, but it doesn't get any leads or customers. I think we're thinking about the same thing. Yeah, I did not say that, Ali. We're not saying any names. I know what you're thinking right now. But that happens, and like, and that's like you said, like it's not always about like how high you rank. There's so much more that goes into. There's so much more output that comes from an article just besides its search rankings. Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that too. Like the true, when people pay for content, and I'm actually working on a piece on this like separately. But like when someone pays for a piece of content, because I've seen it happen too for Omniscient, you get obviously an awesome byline from a freelance writer that has their own audience or is building their own audience. You get their knowledge and their experience. endless repurposing opportunities, endless refreshing opportunities. Like that goes above and beyond an $800 article. So it's really cool to see communities too helping writers demand more for their value. Because when I was a freelancer, I never had that kind of confidence. I was actually Kaylee's first mentoring client.
I remember. Yeah.
I helped she was just such a tremendous help, but I think I in turn helped her shape her coaching program because I didn't know what I didn't know. And she was able to kind of like craft all the stuff to help me. But even by the time I made it to HubSpot, I looked back and I was like, dang, I should have charged more. So I love seeing people being able to do that because that's it's just super important, especially the more that content teams get built out and how all these companies are becoming media companies, which I think is really cool. Freelance writers should definitely charge more. So
yeah, you charge more. Like, how do you do that? Because I feel like I'm on the hiring side. Like I'm almost always going to go for like the lower cost one, all things equal, obviously. So there is some sort of market forces that cause competition.
Well, I'm talking too about like the big names, like what Michael said, those big name companies that can afford to pay more, and they do leverage content beyond just clicking publish one time, right? They refresh it for years to come. They repurpose it for emails and social and product copy. Like they use that content. It's more than just a standalone piece. So I would say I don't know, Michael, you might have more.
Yeah, no. And what they also do is they are hiring subject matter experts, like from internally to come in and look at the articles and make sure they really are set to go. There's just a lot more investment in content in general with those bigger companies. So Alex, I want to ask you you said you would pay for the cheaper one, but what if that $800, $1,000 article writer says to you, like my past results, my content has helped lifted leads by 25%, or, it's seen this much traffic value increase. Like, how do you say no when someone presents you with those kind of like business leading metrics?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that decision. I do think that if you have proof, and especially of the quality and of your kind of working relationship, like I find referrals to be magnificent for that reason. Because one thing I don't want to do is probably spend a lot of time communicating and like going back and forth. And I find that some freelancers, it's worth, even if the content quality is eventually the same, it's worth paying more if somebody gets it right the first try, if they're very good at like producing results, like kind of on the first kind of content brief. So there's certain aspects like that can go into like paying more. And then also, if there's any, social proof or authority based on case studies, I do take those with a grain of salt because, if they write for HubSpot, then you can rank and get results really easily. But can you do that for a domain rating 29 website? Like that's a different story. So I look more into their content quality. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot that goes into it. Obviously, budget is a concern for most companies, but especially like if I'm, hiring for my own site or Omniscient. So, I mean, if I have like a bigger budget, then I'm probably willing to go with more convenience and more, premium quality. And I'm probably willing to like put up with more back and forth and more like editing if I have a lower budget. So, it's that silly answer in this space. It depends.
Well, that's what I was saying is it's a sliding scale on like who's hiring. Like you have a startup, you have a one-man show like Alex, like it's definitely, there's more constraints, but you have larger name businesses that have the budget and they're going to leverage that content. They're probably going to take the byline, which is okay. But there's a lot more in play with those companies that they can afford those higher rates. And I just love to see freelance writers feeling more empowered to at least have the rate conversation, because I hated that conversation every day when I was a freelancer. It was so uncomfortable because I didn't have any of those resources. I had none of that support that was saying like, it's okay to feel uncomfortable, but do it anyway. Or, and whatever you're thinking, add $100 to it or whatever, and just have the negotiation because there's nothing wrong with it. And now that I'm on the hiring side of things, budget is always a consideration. But if I have someone who is going to create kick-ass content and help us look good and minimize not only the back and forth, like Alex said, but the back and forth for edits too, I don't have time for that. That's well worth paying for. But it's all about who's hiring and what they can afford. So it's at least worth opening that door, because it's never as personal as it feels. It's all about just finding a middle ground of like what works for both of you. But as a writer, as a solo person, not having that support, it can feel uncomfortable, like putting your foot down and, having the hard money convo.
Yeah, totally. And again, that's something that we saying, that confidence booster is just saying it's okay. Again, like you said, it's okay if you feel uncomfortable. And one tactic I've used in the past, and I didn't come up with it. A woman who I love, her name is Cindy Gallup. She's a sex tech leader. I love her. And if I ever meet her in person one day, I'm going to be like the happiest person ever. She had said in somewhere on the internet, like if you can't figure out your price, essentially what she said, if you can't figure out your price, just say the highest price you can without laughing. And I've actually used that tactic with some like earlier writers before, and they're like, well, how much should I charge? And I'm like, well, just what's the highest price you can say without laughing? And maybe that price is like $350, $400. Good, settle there. And then how I have scaled my pricing over time is, and this is another thing that we recommend in Peak Freelance, is every time I get a new client, I raise my prices.
Exactly. Are there other ways that you've seen freelancers go from 250 to 500 or 500 to 1,000, other than just kind of like progressively getting confidence and asking for the higher prices?
Yeah, besides like time and writing more for different types of clients and building that confidence, I would say even if you say you take a writing course, be it Peak Freelance or maybe through Hyperlink or Compound Writing. Like if you're like actively building your skills, I would even say start charging higher rates. One, to pay off the cost of that course, but also like you're doing the job of building your skill set. So it only makes sense to, as you get more skillful, you can charge more. So I would say like that's another way. And yeah, the only way I've done, like I said, is every new client, I raise my prices, be it 5. I never had like a set percentage. Now we say like 5 to 10%. I used to just say like, okay, I'm charging this. Now I'm going to charge this. I never had like a structure, but I understand the value in having like a pricing structure where you can consistently raise it. So that's why I say just tack on an extra 5, 10% to your price each client. And eventually you're going to get to that rate that, you're super comfortable at, and you feel like you can, you have more flexibility in your writing career.
I love that. Well, if Ali, did you have anything else?
No, this has been awesome.
All right. Well, let's wrap up then. Michael, did you want to say any last words or point to people, where they can find you online? Of course, peakfreelance.com.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can find me at peakfreelance.com for sure. But if you want to have a chat, my DMs are always open on Twitter, and it's upmost Mike, and I can send it to you guys so you can put it in the show notes or whatever. But that's my Twitter handle. You can also find me on LinkedIn, but I'm more active on Twitter. So if anyone wants to have a chat about freelance writing or content or SEO or whatever, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been
Thanks
great.
for having me.